Welcome back to the Neurophilia podcast. We are your hosts, Dr. Buletko and Nupur Goel. As we come to an end of the first season of the Neurophilia podcast, we wanted to sit down and recap some of our favorite moments thus far, answer some questions from you, our audience, and discuss the future of this platform going forward. In the first season of the Neurophilia podcast, we have had the opportunity to interview so many wonderful people and discuss specialties from neurosurgery to dermatology. We are going to take some time to go through some of our favorite moments from each episode. So, Dr. Buletko, the first episode that we did was titled, Let's Talk About Neurophobia. And that was sort of the first episode that you were a part of, mainly as a guest. And obviously your role has grown throughout this season that we've done. And so I'm curious, what stuck out to you about that first episode?
I think this episode for me was exciting because I got to kick it off by just talking with some of my colleagues about neurology. And I think we talked a little bit about how neurologists really love neurology. And so talking about neurology and knowing that you had so much passion for the meaning behind this podcast, I think it was just so nice to share some mutual interests, but also talk about some barriers that we have within neurology and neurophobia. And so what really stood out to me is just getting to have a nice conversation with two people that I respect a great deal, and also sharing the love, but sharing some of the challenges that we face in neurology.
Absolutely. When I was reflecting on that episode, to me, even though the topic was neurophobia, all I could feel throughout it was the neurophilia. And so I thought it was a great start to the season.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. So for the second episode, we interviewed Dr. Nupur Goel to discuss the relationship between neurology and cardiology.
Yeah, this one was nice for me on maybe more of a personal, professional level because of what I do day in and day out and the interaction that I have with cardiologists, especially interventional cardiologists. And while I have a lot of interaction with many of them here at the Cleveland Clinic, it was so nice to know that collaboration and that shared respect traverses across institutions.
Mm-hmm.
And it was really nice to get to chat with him about some mutual kind of patient care coordination, things that we do together, and that we all have the ability to disagree with each other. But that it's in academic purposes and it's for the patient's best interest. And it's a big reason why a lot of us in academic medicine love academic medicine, because we can have a lot of goals that align, but we can disagree on certain points. And when it all comes back to patient-centered care, it's pretty powerful, and we learn a lot from each other.
Yeah, absolutely. Something that stood out to me about that episode, it was our first time asking someone that wasn't in neurology about neurophobia. And I remember after we finished recording with Dr. Goel, I said to you, I can't believe an interventional cardiologist experienced neurophobia. And you told me it's a lot more common than you think. And it's not just medical students and resident doctors. And so it gave me even more passion and recognize the purpose of this platform is not just for that group of people. It goes beyond medical school. It goes beyond residency. It goes beyond neurology. It impacts all of us in different ways. And so what a great episode, and what a great person to start these interdisciplinary conversations with. After we finished that one, we went on to neurology and dermatology with none other than Dr. Elliot Mostow. What stood out to you from that conversation?
What stood out with me from the start was the fact that you were just very, very, very set on doing a podcast on neurology and dermatology. And I remember we had so many conversations about how are we going to make this work, and what's going to be the response from listeners, and can we really try to intertwine this? And then, the more that I started thinking about it, and the more that I started thinking about the overlap between cutaneous disorders and neurology and just medicine in general, I think that dermatology has a lot of overlap with a lot of different specialties of medicine. And so I think that if we think about dermatology as just an outpatient practice, and they do their own thing and they cut out some moles and they do some skin assessments, I don't think that we get the full scope of what they can offer and how it ties into some of our neurological diseases. And so I think that it was nice to reflect on that and how could I not like Elliot's unique take on medicine, on life, on the humanities. So that was more of a holistic view of life and medicine in general, not just specific to the interplay between neurology and dermatology. And I really appreciated that.
Absolutely. I feel the exact same way. Then we went on to neurology and psychiatry. And with this one, we sat down with Dr. Randon Welton.
Yes. So I remember that Randon and I felt so energized and so charged after this. It was how I felt similarly to our first episode, where I just had this like passion where I wanted to go out and just like see, I wanted to go see patients and I wanted to go talk about neurology. And whenever Randon and I talked, it was we had such a shared passion. And it's like he would say something and it would make me more passionate, and I would say something and he would get more excited about it. And I think it shows that we're cut from the same cloth. I think sometimes it's easy when you have differing opinions with your psychiatry colleagues to forget why the ABPN exists and why we are together, and why there's a lot of shared shared thoughts about just the brain in general, and also how we can approach what we both do from different sides. Sorry, you might have to cut that part out.
That's okay.
I don't know how to say it exactly. So do you just want to do the neurology and psychiatry over again? Because I'm going to have a hard time splicing it back in.
Yeah, we can do that.
Sorry.
No, you're fine. So the next episode that we did was neurology and psychiatry. And for this one, we sat down with Dr. Randon Welton.
Yeah, whenever we talked with Randon, I think it brought me back to our first episode where I just had this really, really, really strong passion for what I do and what he does. And, it made me want to go and see patients and take care of more patients and really just be a neurologist. And I thought that it was really important to remember that while we can sometimes disagree with our psychiatry colleagues, the ABPN exists for a reason. We're cut from the same cloth. We kind of fed off of each other's passion, and it was really exciting. I also really appreciated his approach to psychiatry from a neuroanatomy standpoint. I think that it was really eye-opening and really nice to hear how much he thinks through what he does as a psychiatrist and how it interplays with neurology. I thought that was really special, and I thought it tied into what we're trying to do with neurology really well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think something that's been very special about this first season is that every single guest we've had on is so passionate about what they do. Like whether it is neurology or something else, we have just been so lucky to have so many wonderful guests on this season. And so I agree with you entirely. And so the next episode we did was neurology and neurosurgery. And we sat down with the one and only Dr. Julie Chen for that episode.
Yeah, listen, whenever I was in medical school and whenever I first started, even in residency, you always heard about this like tug of war between neurology and neurosurgery. And it was always like, I remember you would go on interviews and you would have to feel like you have to ask this question of what is the interaction between neurology and neurosurgery at your institute, because you didn't want to go to a place. And this was the word on the street, is that you didn't want to go to a place where neurology and neurosurgery were fighting all the time, and it was this turf war. And I haven't experienced that nearly as much as what I was anticipating coming into the neurology world, which is absolutely great. And I hope that not a lot of people out there are in these days. But I think talking with Julie, it was just so nice to be so collaborative and to just hear that they also share a similar feeling about us, at least I hope most of the time, as neurologists, and that really we help each other. And we help each other because we have a very big shared patient population. And working alongside of each other with a very patient-centered care in mind, I think is where neurology and neurosurgery has gone in the last decade. And I absolutely love it. And I think that it is, they're some of the people that we work with the most on a day-to-day basis. So hearing her perspective, hearing her journey to where she got, was just absolutely amazing. I think my mouth probably dropped whenever she gave us that initial story, about her brother. And so I just really love to hear her story. And I love to be reinforced that this neurology neurosurgery interplay isn't this bad thing that we used to talk about. It should be something that's emphasized, and it should be something to where you say, I can't wait to work with my neurosurgical colleagues to help take care of patients.
Yeah. I've always been very impressed by Dr. Chen. I don't think I've never used the word impressive as much as I have during that hour-long conversation with her, because that's the only way to describe her. And what I found extremely powerful about that episode was this conversation we got into about imposter syndrome, and especially the way that she was a trailblazer in her experience of being a female neurosurgeon going through the Cleveland Clinic's neurosurgery residency program, and just seeing who she is today and the steps that she took to get there. It's just very inspiring as a young female myself. And I know a lot of people who listened to that episode resonated with her story. So yeah, I just really resonated with that part of it. Now, the next episode we did was Neurology and Medicine. And this episode featured Dr. Deborah Plate and Dr. Austin Fredrickson.
So it's exactly what we both have done already whenever we even think about this episode, and that's start laughing, right? I mean, I don't think that we've laughed more doing this podcast in this season than whenever we did that episode. So whether it was sharing patient stories, whether it was just a shared understanding of being a physician and what we all go through on a day-to-day basis, I had a great time, and hearing Austin's perspective on doing rural medicine, I thought was extremely interesting and shed a lot of light on some of the discrepancies and healthcare disparities that we can see in different areas. And I know that we laughed a lot, but I think there were a lot of good take-home points. I think that this one was a fan favorite. Obviously, Deb is very thoughtful. She's very collaborative. You can just tell, like, what I was thinking too. I was like, if I needed a PCP, like right now, like either one of these two people, like bring it on. Like, yes, I will. Can I come and see you next week for these ailments that I have? So just two wonderful people that I laughed a ton with. And I felt like we almost instantly all became friends. And it was just such a great episode. And I realized too that neurology and medicine, it is a very, very, very close relationship, maybe closer than everything else that we've talked about. And so I really appreciated that episode.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's so funny that you say that, because literally yesterday I was having a conversation with my parents about them needing to change PCP. And I was like, you know who you should go to? Dr. Deb Plate in Akron, Ohio. I would recommend her above everyone else, as well as Dr. Fredrickson. But yeah, my favorite part of that conversation had to be Dr. Fredrickson. I mean, just his experiences, his journey, and just the way that he carries himself. He's just such a great man all around. And it made me feel very fortunate and blessed to come from a university like Neomed that has such great physicians that are part of it, to have met such wonderful people and have them be on this podcast to share their thoughts and their wisdom with the rest of our audience is just really special for me.
Remember that if your parents get hooked in with Austin, they could go to a McDonald's and they could do virtual visits with him and all the subspecialists that he has them see. So major shout out to the both of them for giving us a good mid-season laugh while we were doing all of this.
Yes, absolutely. So the next episode that we recorded was Neurology and Palliative Medicine, and this featured Dr. Catherine Neuendorf as well as Dr. Renato Samala.
Yeah, this one was nice because these are people that I get to interact with, not on an infrequent basis. And I think what Renato is doing in his own niche in the outpatient world with Parkinson's is really unique and really special. And I know that there are programs out there like this that exist, but just so cool to hear his perspective. I absolutely loved whenever he started talking about small victories, and it was just so uplifting. And I know that this was an episode that we recorded after a little bit of a lull in the podcast while we were wrapping some things up. And obviously the end of the year is very busy for the academic year. And so I know that both of us had a lot going on. So like to jump back in and to really talk with two specialists was really exciting. Katie and I have had a lot of shared patients together, and you and I talked about this offline a little bit, but how she is with patients and with teams and providers, and her multidisciplinary approach is like nothing that I've ever seen before. And I respect her a great deal for everything that she does, and hearing kind of her personal side of what she does and how it impacts her was really special. And I think learning about the timing and the utilization of palliative medicine, maybe more than what we do and more appropriately than what we do, was really impactful for me and in my own practice. So I really enjoyed that episode.
Yeah, I echo all of those thoughts. And the last episode that we actually just got done recording, Neurology and Ethics, featuring Dr. Paul Ford, PhD, and Professor Lauren Sankari, JD.
Yeah, so, this episode, which we just got done with, like you said a little bit ago, I think it was the first time that we were planning on recording this season recap right after we did the last episode. And I told you that I just needed a pause. And I think that I needed a pause because it was an extremely reflective episode. And it was an episode that made me think a lot about what we do for our patients and the roles that we have in life in general. And it was just extremely reflective. It kind of like the conversation came from the soul a little bit more. And again, two just phenomenally accomplished people that do this work every single day. It just makes me very appreciative of the both of them and the work that they do, the collaboration that we have. And I think it reminded me that we have people to help us. We have wonderful ethicists around that can help us not only inpatient, but outpatient, not only with patients and families, but with our own struggles through some of these. And it was really impactful. And if you don't have an ethicist that's available, or if you're listening to this and you haven't experienced or rotated with ethicists, I would highly suggest it. And try to find a collaboration. If your hospital or your offices don't have somebody that you can tap into, try to find somebody that you can collaborate with, because I just feel like there's a different perspective that they bring to difficult situations that is extremely important for both sides of the medical kind of team. And it was a very reflective, thought-provoking episode that allowed me to think about myself as a person and also as a neurologist.
Absolutely. Well, now that we've taken some time to take a trip down memory lane, it's time to answer some questions from our amazing Neurophilia audience. And all these questions that we have are coming from us on Twitter, which you can follow us at Neurophilia Pod.
And I know that one of these questions is kind of dating us back to when you had this wonderful idea of starting this podcast. And I was going back and looking through my emails. For those of you who don't know, I mean, I feel like I've known Nupur forever. Just to put this into perspective and to show you what she has done in such a brief period of time, the first email interaction that you and I had was in September of this last year.
Yeah.
That is not a lot of time. So it went from, hi, nice to meet you, even though we went to the same medical school, and I've already given you a hard time about that, to will you help with this idea that I have? And then will you continue to be on every episode with me, to now us being great friends and having a great relationship. And it's just been amazing to watch what you've accomplished in such a short amount of time. But I mean, give the listeners, give the readers what they want, and tell us what sparked all of this to begin with, and how did you make it all possible?
Yeah, that's a great question. And wow, I can't believe it was only September. It does feel longer than that. For me, my journey to neurology has obviously not been linear. It's something that has taken time and something that I've been very reflective of, especially coming from a medical institution where there isn't a clerkship, and it's not very easy to explore someone's passion in neurology. And so even before this year, I sort of had that feeling of like, wow, I wish this process could be easier for people to come like after me. And then, when it came to applying for neurology, I am a big proponent of public speaking as well as education and helping spread the word about neurology. And so in my personal statement for residency, I actually wrote, down the line when I'm, old and I've been doing this job for 50 years, I hope that I help dispel neurophobia in the medical community. And during one of my interviews, a residency program director actually asked me, what's your solution for getting rid of neurophobia? And I hadn't thought about it until that moment in time. And, I said education because it made the most sense to me in that moment. And it didn't get out of my head. How could I want to dispel something that I don't have a solution to? And so I was thinking about the word neurophobia, and I kept saying it in my head. And then I thought about the opposite of it. And I said the word neurophilia. And literally the next thought that came was, that's a great podcast title. And so I called my dad and I was like, I have this crazy idea. I know I'm applying to residency. I don't have a lot of time, but I just can't let it go. And I remember the following week, I actually was interviewing with you. And so we were on an interview together. And I remember we were talking and you told me, you're like, these 10 minutes are whatever you want to talk about, because obviously we know each other. And in my mind, I was like, is this the moment that I should be asking him about this, or should I be asking about the residency program? And I just told you about my idea, and seeing the way that you received it gave me a lot more reassurance in what I wanted to do. And so I spent the next couple of months just throwing things together. And I'm a firm believer in kind of jumping off a cliff and building your wings on the way down. If you wait to sort of plan everything out, it takes a long time for that to happen. And sort of that hesitancy of, oh, I want this to be perfect, can get in the way of things getting done. And so I've been very fortunate at my time at Neomed to form a lot of great connections with people outside of neurology. And so I knew a bunch of people that I wanted to talk to. And in terms of sort of the podcast material and what we focus on, I wanted to make sure that this podcast wasn't just an educational podcast where we went through an approach to stroke, an approach to seizure, but rather was something that brought people together from different platforms, from different fields of medicine. And so that's sort of where it all came from. And I've been very, very lucky and blessed to have Dr. Buletko be part of this long-term. And to our audience, the way that it has grown over just a few months of doing this has just been very fulfilling for me personally. And I'm just really excited to see where it goes from here.
Yeah, and Nupur, you know how I feel about everything that you've accomplished in such a short period of time with all of this. And it's easy to be a part of this when you do so much work to get ready for everything. You coordinate everything. For those of you who don't know, there's a lot that goes into a podcast that we have learned on the way. And so thank you for bearing with us and understanding really what direction we should go and some of the technical difficulties that we've had along the way. But I would say that thank you for doing this. Thank you for putting actions to your words. And thank you for giving us in the community something different, something that we don't have. I think that you had me whenever you said exactly what you just said, where you wanted to create a conversational podcast to where we can just all share a love for neurology and we can understand neurophilia or neurophobia a little bit better so that we can counteract it with neurophilia. And it was just so nice there's so many great educational podcasts out there that go through things from an evidence-based medicine standpoint. And you doing something so different, I think, is very needed in our community. And I know has been impactful for at least myself and all of our listeners and all of our guests. I think have really enjoyed it as well. So thanks for all that you've done there.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the next question is for you, Dr. Buletko. So our podcast has brought together people of different perspectives. How has this influenced your understanding of the neurology field?
Yeah, this is a hard one because I felt like this has been a little bit different from every single episode that we've recorded. I take something away from this. What I have come to understand from the podcast in general in this first season is that we as neurologists, we generally love neurology. People that go into neurology, they really love neurology. People that don't typically really don't like neurology. Now, there are some people that are blurring the lines, but I would say that they're few and far between. And we heard from some of them actually on this podcast. But I would say that not only reinforcing my passion for neurology and why I do what I do, which has been really, really beneficial from a personal standpoint, but also understanding the challenges that people have with neurology and also what people love about neurology outside of neurology and what can we continue to do, but what can we do better to help our colleagues in other areas to really dispel neurophobia. And I think dispelling neurophobia is one part of it, but I think continuing to do a good job of what we're doing a good job with, I think is maybe understated. And so you heard throughout this of some of the things that people loved about neurology and some of the things that neurology they feel we do a good job of. And I think that we as clinicians often focus on what needs fixed. What's the deficit? What needs fixed? How can I fix it? Rather than sitting back and saying, what are we doing well? How can we continue to do this well? How can we do it even better than what we're doing right now? And I think that we got a little bit of all of that from this podcast. So personal reflection, personal re-sparking of my love for neurology, a lot of great conversation with really great colleagues. I think that we probably, even though we do collaboration day to day, we don't have the opportunity to sit and talk with each other. And so even just being able to take some time out of our days and just sit and talk with all these amazing people, I don't think a lot of people get to say that. And I hope that our listeners get to hear that. And I hope our listeners are taking something away from these conversations. And I hope that it encourages all of our listeners to sit down and talk with their collaborators and talk with their colleagues. And even if it's another neurologist, just sit down and talk with each other, because you learn so much just from having a conversation. I don't think that we do enough of that anymore.
Beautifully said.
Yeah. I think as we wrap up the season, moving on, a lot of people want to know, is this it? Is this the end of the podcast? What are you doing next? Are you doing something next? You are obviously making a big transition into residency. And so what should everybody expect? What does a timeline look like? What are you planning on doing? This has always been your show, your passion. So if you could fill us in, because I don't even know all these answers of what you're about to say, if you could fill us in on what's next for you and what's next for Neurophilia, I think that would be great.
Yeah. Well, in terms of the timeline, there is no timeline, right? I mean, this is something that I believe in lifelong learning. I know you feel the same way. And there's always new conversations to be had, new people to meet. And so I don't see an end date for this podcast going forward, hopefully. In terms of like the subject matter, for the first season, our focus has been neurophobia. It's something that we ask every single guest that comes on. And so that has been a really great place to start, because it kind of gives an understanding of why we're doing what we're doing, right? But from now on, I really want to focus more on the neurophilia. And so I think it's time to delve deeper into neurology and sort of look at all the subspecialties under the sun and talk to people of all of these subspecialties. How did they get to where they are? Focusing on those journeys, focusing on that storytelling that is so important in neurology. And just seeing where it takes us. I don't have a roadmap. Like I said, I'm building my wings on the way down. And, something that I do want to mention is, as you said, I will be entering residency, which makes the timing of this a little bit more difficult. And so while we might not be releasing episodes as frequently as we have been over the past couple months, they will still be coming. They will be high quality productions, but they might be a little bit not as frequent as they have in the past. But what can you expect for the next season? A lot more neurophilia, a lot more cool neurologists and cool people in general that we're going to be talking to, and just a lot more to come.
Yeah, I love that. And I know that we've talked about a couple of different ideas, and I'm glad that you really settled on this. I think it's great. I mean, it's going to be like all those conversations with other neurologists throughout this brief season. It's just like that the whole season, which I absolutely can't wait for. And we haven't even scratched the surface of subspecialty neurology, and it is just flourishing right now. I think that a lot of people in medical school, pre-med, definitely residency, and then beyond, after we get so subspecialized, sometimes you lose sight of what other subspecialties are doing.
Yeah.
And so really, I was thinking about this, and I was like, who in the neurology community would not benefit from a shared love of neurophilia from a subspecialty standpoint? And I can't think of anybody who wouldn't benefit from listening to other subspecialists talk about what do they love about their subspecialty, and not necessarily what are the latest and greatest evidence-based papers and what has come out,
right,
which I'm sure we'll get into some of that. But I absolutely can't wait. I think it's going to really focus our neurophilia listeners in on the next season. And so I'm really excited about it also.
Yeah, absolutely.
I have a question. Are you going to have a vascular neurologist come on do I get to talk to a different vascular neurologist?
See, I've kicked around that idea. And so part of me is like, do we bring back Dr. Itrat from the first episode? Or maybe it's just a you and I episode again, but
maybe I'll sit that one out and you can have free reign. And then maybe at that point in time, you'll realize that you like other co-hosts better. Who knows?
Who knows? The possibilities are endless.
Yeah.
Well, as we do with every single episode of Neurophilia, we always ask our guests their no-brainers. And I have taken away this opportunity from you every single episode. And so I thought it was only fair in our season 1 recap for me to ask you about your no-brainers.
I've been excited to hear everybody else's no-brainers all season. And I think I always love, because whenever you ask one that resonates with them, there's always a pause, and you probably splice this out. But sometimes I wish that the listeners could hear the pause and the reflection that people have. Mm-hmm. And I was always like, ooh, this is really fun to watch on video and fun to listen to. But I was like, I'm also really glad that I'm not the one that has to do it. So you did warn me about these, so I'm ready whenever you are.
Yeah, I did warn you, but usually I sometimes provide guests with what they're going to be beforehand. I did not do that same thing for you. So
That's
this
fair.
is completely a surprise.
I'm ready.
You ready? Favorite part of being a co-host on the Neurophilia podcast?
Seeing how far you've taken this and getting to chat with people that I normally would not have a chance to chat with.
If you wrote a memoir, what would the title be?
The Kid Who Wanted to Be a Neurologist at 10 years old.
I love that. You wear many hats. You're a PD, you are a professor at both Case and Cleveland Clinic School of Medicine, you're a vascular neurologist, you're a podcast co-host. What is the best part of your job?
I'm scared to answer this one because I know that you always have a question that says, what are you most proud of? And this is also the best part of my job, is watching the amazing things that people do around me every single day. Sometimes these are my colleagues, sometimes these are trainees, sometimes these are students. The things that happen if you just open your eyes and look for it, it's pretty amazing. And again, we focus on deficits, but if you open your eyes and you look for good things that people are doing, you will find so many of them.
Yeah. If you could have dinner with any person, dead or alive, who would it be?
My grandpa. He was an extra parent to me my whole life, and we lost him several years ago, and he was always my source of calmness. And so if I could have dinner with anybody, it would be him.
What are you most proud of?
I don't know the right answer to this. And I think if you ask me, what am I most proud of? It's what I already said. It's watching the amazing things that are done every single day and the selflessness that people have around me that I think doesn't get enough attention. That's what I'm most proud of, honestly. My proudest moment in my own personal life was when I received notification that I had passed the neurology boards. And it was almost exactly 21 years after I wrote that paper when I was 10 about why I wanted to be a neurologist. It was such a surreal moment for me, and it was probably the most proud moment of my life.
Wow.
So now I know why these are so hard for everybody. I appreciate you giving me warning, but I didn't give you warning that I also wrote no-brainers for you.
Oh, no.
So for all of you who don't know, and for all of you who are still listening to us chat back and forth, you don't get to hear a lot from Nupur other than her guiding our conversation. And she's just such a special, amazing person. And I know a lot of you that have met her at conferences or have met her in real life, you can attest to this. So I wrote some questions down for you so that our listeners who may not know you can get at least a little bit of a glimpse. So are you ready for your no-brainers?
I am not, but
all right. What is your favorite go-to meal?
Oh, my favorite go-to meal. Okay, this needs a little bit of explanation. So there's
Do you know that no-brainers are supposed to be just a word
a
or
word or a sentence? Okay,
Yeah.
I can provide you with the word, but it's gonna need some explaining.
Fair.
So the word is khichdi, and it is an Indian dish that it's kind of like chicken noodle soup. Like it serves the same purpose. It's really just yellow lentils mixed with rice and obviously some Indian spices. And it's usually for people when they're sick. I grew up eating khichdi like baby food because I was obsessed with it growing up. And it's my favorite thing to eat in the entire world, only if it's cooked by my dad. And so anytime I come home, that's the one meal that's cooked in the house for the entire time I'm there. So my dad's khichdi is my go-to comfort meal.
I was going to say, sounds like a great comfort meal.
Yes.
How do you unwind?
Working out.
What has been your favorite part of this podcast / this is a two-parter, sorry, I cheated. Have we dispelled any neurophobia for you?
Oh, that's a great question. My favorite part of this podcast has been sitting down with so many amazing individuals. And yes and no. I think that some of the neurophobia has gone away just by talking to other neurologists and people outside of neurology who share neurophilia. But it also, in talking about the responsibilities and the absolute privilege a neurologist has, it definitely makes me a little bit worried about the profession I'm entering into down the line.
What is one piece of advice that you could give to a student who is interested in neurology or struggling to find their way through figuring out what they want to do?
Keep trying.
I like it. Do you want me to say the last one?
Is it going to be the one that I think it's going to be?
What are you most proud of?
I'm very proud of, oh, this is hard. Trying to think of how to put it. I'm very proud of all that I've been able to do in such a short existence.
I like it. Thanks for answering those. And I think it lets you all know out there too that we are all real people. We all, we all struggle with different things. We all are very proud of certain things. So I hope that you're all reflecting and thinking about what you're most proud of and focusing on that from time to time too. So I know that we both hope that you've taken something away from this season. We want to hear from you. We want to know what you all want. I mean, this is great for us to do, but we also want to make sure that this is really filling a gap that we have within our community and that we can really shine some light on some things that you all want to know about. So please follow us on Twitter. Please let us know what your comments are. Even if you absolutely hated one of our episodes and you didn't like something that we did, these are good pieces of feedback also. So please let us know. And we appreciate all of you for taking some time out to listen to maybe a little bit of an atypical neurology podcast.
Absolutely. Well, that concludes season 1 of the Neurophilia podcast, as well as the recap of season 1. On behalf of the Neurophilia podcast, we would like to express our sincere, heartfelt thanks for joining us on this incredible journey throughout the first season. To anyone who has listened, downloaded an episode, shared it with a friend, or wrote a review, thank you. When we embarked on this podcast adventure, we hope to create a platform that would engage, educate, and entertain all of those fascinated by the intricacies of the human brain and the wonders of neurology. It has been an absolute pleasure to bring you conversations, stories, and knowledge from some of the brightest minds in medicine. We are so excited to grow this platform and hope you will continue to join us in this new direction. Please let us know what you thought about this first season. You can always reach us on Twitter and Instagram at the social media handle @NeurophiliaPod. See you next time.